Welcome to the Explainer. You know, when you look outside your window, it's super easy to just see plants as the passive background of our lives, right? Like they're just the green wallpaper of the earth, quietly sitting there while all the animals do the actual moving and shaking. But what if I told you that is a complete illusion? Today, we're going to look at the hidden mechanics of the plant kingdom to reveal that they are, in fact, the absolute master evolutionary engineers of the biosphere. Okay, let's dive into this. I want you to think about the ultimate engineering problem. Think about what it actually takes to survive, to eat, to defend yourself, and, of course, to reproduce. Now, try doing literally all of that while being completely sessile, meaning you are permanently bolted to the ground. No way you can run from predators, you can't just walk over to an all-you-can-eat buffet, and you definitely can't roam around searching for a mate. Yet somehow, plants have managed to conquer virtually every terrestrial environment on Earth. So, how do they do it? Well, by engineering some highly specific cellular adaptations and complex biomechanical systems that totally solve this stationary problem. To see exactly how they pull this off, we're going to break things down into a logical flow. First, we'll look at the botanical building blocks. 2. Solar panels and sugar. 3. Pumping water without a heart. 4. Chemical command and control. 5. The reproductive revolution. And finally, 6. The evolution of the plant kingdom. All right, let's kick things off with Section 1. The botanical building blocks, engineering at the micro level. So, to support this stationary lifestyle and actually grow vertically against the constant crushing force of gravity, plant cells had to evolve specific organelles that animal cells just don't have. And the absolute foundation of this vertical growth is something called turgor pressure. Think of it like a flexible water balloon shoved inside a rigid cardboard box. In this analogy, the water balloon is the plant cell's central vacuole. This is a massive storage compartment that can actually take up to 90% of a mature cell's total volume. The cardboard box? That's the rigid cellulose cell wall. When a plant is nice and hydrated, water rushes right into that central vacuole through osmosis. It swells up, pushing really hard against that rigid cell wall. That outward hydrostatic tension is your turgor pressure, and it is exactly what keeps non-woody plants firm and standing tall. If water gets scarce, the balloon shrinks, the pressure drops to zero, and, yep, the plant wilts. Now, all these individual cells organize themselves into 4 genuinely brilliant tissue systems. First up, you've got meristematic tissue. Think of this as a perpetual growth engine made of undifferentiated stem cells just constantly driving the plant taller and wider. Second, there's the dermal tissue, which acts as a tough, waxy, waterproof skin. Third is the ground tissue. This provides everything from flexible support, like think of the stringy stuff in a celery stalk, that's parenchyma, all the way to heavy mechanical armor, like the gritty sclerenchyma cells you feel in pear skins. But honestly, perhaps the most vital is the fourth system, the vascular tissue. Picture the xylem as a dead, heavily lignified, one-way water pipe just pulling moisture straight up. And running right parallel to it is the phloem, a bidirectional, living highway that's busy transporting sugars and nutrients to wherever the plant needs them most. Moving on to Section 2, solar panels and sugar, capturing the sun. Okay, so we've got our structural framework, right? But how does an organism that literally can't move actually get its energy? Well, the answer is in their specialized organs, specifically the leaves, which, if you think about it, are effectively the most brilliant, highly optimized solar capture panels on Earth. So the crucial point here is photosynthesis. It's the ultimate solution to the energy problem. Inside these really specialized double membrane organelles called chloroplasts, the plant takes carbon dioxide, water, and solar electromagnetic radiation and just biochemically transforms them into stable chemical bond energy, sugar, and oxygen. I mean, it is the primary carbon source for the entire biosphere. And this metabolic magic happens in 2 beautifully interconnected phases. On the daytime shift, we have the light-dependent reactions, acting basically as a power generator. Embedded right in the thylakoid membranes, chlorophyll captures incoming photons. That excites electrons down a transport chain to pump protons and generate biological energy batteries, specifically ATP and NADPH. Then we move to the light-independent phase, also known as the Calvin cycle, where the plant actually uses that stored power. Taking place in the fluid stroma, an incredibly abundant enzyme called rubisco physically grabs carbon dioxide straight out of thin air and uses those energy batteries we just made to build triose sugars. Now, what's really interesting about this is what happens back during those light reactions. When the plant's photosystems lose electrons down that transport chain, they absolutely have to replace them. And they do this through a process called photolysis. Basically, the plant literally splits a water molecule apart just to steal its electrons. And in doing so, it accidentally releases oxygen gas as a metabolic byproduct. This incredible, tiny biochemical theft is exactly what pumped oxygen into our atmosphere to begin with. And it's what keeps you, me, and our entire biosphere alive today. Pretty wild, right? Let's hit section 3, pumping water without a heart, the cohesion tension theory. So splitting all that water for photosynthesis, plus keeping all those central vacuoles completely full of water to maintain turgor pressure, it requires a massive continuous supply of water from the soil, which leads us to one of the greatest mechanical physics problems in all of nature. Just picture a towering redwood. How on earth does a massive tree pump water hundreds of feet straight up, totally fighting against the crushing force of gravity, when it doesn't even have a heart, a nervous system, or any kind of mechanical pump? The answer here is passive physics, perfectly explained by the cohesion tension theory. Let's walk through it. Step 1 is transpiration. As water evaporates out of the microscopic pores in the leaves, it creates a negative hydrostatic suction right at the top of the plant. Step 2 is cohesion. You see, water molecules are polar. They absolutely love to form hydrogen bonds and stick together. Step 3 is adhesion. Those water molecules also stick to the hydrophilic walls of the xylem tubes, which stops the water from just slipping back down. So, what's the end result? The plant isn't pushing water up at all. Instead, the sheer force of evaporation at the leaf passively pulls an unbroken, cohesive liquid chain of water straight up from the roots all the way to the highest canopy. But of course, this creates a really dangerous trade-off. To actually get the carbon dioxide it needs for photosynthesis, the plant has to open pores on its leaves called stomata, but opening them causes transpirational water loss. If they leave those pores open too long, the plant dehydrates and dies. Enter the guard cells. These are brilliant little biological valves that flank the stomata. When the plant needs carbon and has plenty of water, these cells actively pump in potassium ions. Water naturally follows via osmosis, so the cells swell up with turgor pressure, bow outward, and pop the pore open. But when a drought hits, the ions leak out, the cells completely deflate, and the pore shrinks shut to conserve water. It is a constant, minute-by-minute balancing act between starving for carbon or dying of thirst. Moving into section 4, chemical command and control. Plant hormones. So managing all this complex plumbing, balancing the stomata, and directing new growth obviously requires a highly sophisticated command center. But as we know, plants don't have brains. Instead, they rely on trace chemical messengers called phytohormones. And it's amazing how specialized these are. Take auxins, for example. Produced right at the very tips of the shoots, they dictate how a plant physically bends toward the light. When light hits one side of a stem, auxins migrate over to the shaded side, making those specific cells elongate, which effectively steers the plant toward the sun. Then you have ethylene, which is actually a gas. It's an airborne communication signal that triggers fruit ripening and tells leaves it's time to drop in autumn. And yes, this is literally why one bad apple spoils the whole bunch. Then when the plant experiences a drought, dry roots synthesize abscisic acid, or ABA. This is the ultimate stress hormone. It travels up to the leaves and forces those guard cells we just talked about to lock shut. Meanwhile, you've got gibberellins and cytokinins acting as the gas pedals, stimulating rapid elongation and active lateral branching. All right, section 5, the reproductive revolution. Angiosperm engineering. Now we're facing the final macro-level challenge of this explainer. If you literally can't walk over to a mate, how on earth do you achieve genetic exchange? Well, the flowering plants, known as angiosperms, engineered a seriously revolutionary solution. And this brilliantly illustrates their overall sophistication. Angiosperms use flowers, which are essentially highly visual and scented billboards specifically designed to attract animal pollinators. Inside, the flower houses the male stamen, producing pollen, and the female pistil, which holds the ovule. When a pollinator drops off pollen, this totally unique process called double fertilization kicks in. 2 sperm cells travel down into the ovule. One fertilizes the egg to create the diploid plant embryo, but the second one fuses with polar nuclei to create a triploid tissue called the endosperm. This double action guarantees that the developing seed has a nutrient-rich packed lunch ready to go for its dormant journey. Right after fertilization, the flower undergoes this dramatic transformation. The internal ovule hardens up into a seed, while the surrounding ovary wall swells and matures into a fruit. But here is the real perspective shift. Fruits are absolutely not made to feed the seed inside them. Actually, they are genius evolutionary tools designed specifically to manipulate mobile animals. By offering up a fleshy, sweet reward, plants are basically using animals as long-distance biological transport vehicles. They are essentially turning us into their unpaid biological Ubers, passing their seeds safely through our digestive tracts so they can be dropped off in new, uncrowded territories.
Finally, Section 6, Evolution of the Plant Kingdom, Conquering Dry Land.
Obviously, these botanical engineering marvels didn't just pop up overnight. They're the result of millions of years of rigorous evolutionary trial and error as plants slowly transitioned from water onto dry land. Let's move through the timeline and see how this all builds. It all started way back with ancestral aquatic green algae. Then, the very first transition to land gave us the bryophytes, like mosses. But they didn't have vascular tissue yet, which means no internal plumbing. Since they couldn't pull water up, they were permanently trapped as these low-growing, moisture-dependent mats. The massive leap forward came with the seedless vascular plants, like ferns. They evolved that dead xylem plumbing we discussed, allowing them to finally grow tall and form the very first forests. Next came the gymnosperms, like conifers. They evolved pollen and seeds, completely breaking their reproductive dependency on liquid water. And finally, we hit the modern peak, the angiosperms. By combining that awesome vascular plumbing with the targeted pollination of flowers and the protected dispersal of fruits, they just exploded across the globe. Today, they absolutely dominate, making up over 90% of all living plant species.
So from microscopic turgor pressure and chemical water splitting, all the way to literally harnessing animals as delivery mechanisms, plants have completely solved every biological challenge thrown at them without ever taking a single step. So the next time you look outside, remember that green blur is actually a hyper-advanced silent engine driving our entire biosphere. It really makes you wonder, what other silent microscopic machinations are happening right beneath our feet? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and honestly, I hope you never look at a leaf the exact same way again.